Hello and welcome, heroes, to the Crit Academy. I am your host, Justin.
And I am Monty Martin from the Dungeon Dudes, jumping in this week as a guest.
I am Kelly McLaughlin, also from the Dungeon Dudes, as a guest this week.
And I am your co-host, Austin.
I'm your co-host, Ian.
And hopefully we can bring some new fun inspiration out on the show. Thank you so much for having us jump in.
Yeah, we're super happy to have you. One of our listeners is already happy to see you on here.
I was really nervous.
Me too, because we are fans of Dungeon Dudes ourselves, so this is really exciting. We want to thank everyone for joining us today, especially the Dungeon Dudes, here at Crit Academy Studios, where everything's made up and your roles don't matter.
That's right, your rolls don't matter, like me taking the lucky feat and forgetting to use it every chance I get.
Nice.
My rogue has taken the lucky feat, and I have forgotten many times where I'm like, oh yeah, I could just use this, and maybe I won't die this time.
I always feel like with powers like that, at least me in my experiences, people reserve them from that one moment and then forget they got it when they need it. So
yeah.
It's exactly like all those healing potions that you stockpile for the final boss and then don't use them. You're saving it for when you really need it.
Yes.
When you really needed it was several rounds ago.
For sure.
Before you were rolling death saving throws, probably.
Yeah, probably.
That's awesome.
Before your friends were down and unconscious, and you're like, I could use a healing potion, but I could also just burn one more spell slot.
Before we get into our main topic today, I just want to let everyone know that we are super excited. On Tuesday, June 29th, we are launching our Kickstarter, Capes and Crooks, a superhero 5e game. All backers will get a full playtest version once we're funded. So I'm super excited for that. Every episode, we like to start off by giving away fat loots. And today we are giving away the Way of the Druid Compliments of DM Conclave.
Want me to talk about it?
Yeah, sorry about that. I kind of strolled in your area. I'm nervous.
Took over my territory.
Sorry.
The most obscure and mystical of character classes, the Druid, has been gifted with many more game options for the ones who treasure, defend, and nurture nature. Within its pages, you will find 5 new Druid circles that will enrich your experience, 3 Druidic factions, 9 new spells to aid you in your way, no less than 48 herbs, and 20 herbalism recipes for the herbalism skill, and so much more. For all you Druid fans, this might be for you.
Yes, I love these products. Who's our winner today?
Our winner today is Tom Burdick.
Woo! Yay! Congratulations!
Congrats, Tom.
Congrats.
Good job, Tom.
But
You
don't
did
worry
it.
if you didn't win, because you can just head over to critacademy.com and subscribe to our newsletter to get a chance to win. It's free, it's easy, you just gotta do it.
Yeah.
It's that easy.
Give away other free stuff.
That's it. We always give away fat loots, 2 things every week, so consider signing up. Now, on to the main topic. I am super excited to talk Dungeons of Drakkenheim with the legendary Dungeon Dudes, Monty and Kelly. Once again, thank you guys so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Pleasure.
For those who don't know, can you tell us a little bit about yourselves? Maybe Kelly, would you like to go first?
Yeah, so I'm Kelly McLaughlin. I've been playing D&D for, 10, 11 years now. Monty probably actually knows better than me. He was my DM from the very beginning. And when we worked together at a computer shop, Monty just started talking to me. We were talking about pretty casual stuff, and somehow that slipped easily into discussing necromancy. Which is a pretty common thing, right? To give some context there, to give some context there, he pitched the idea of Dungeons and Dragons to me, and I told him that I had been kind of like dabbling with the idea of playing it my whole life. I had come from a background of playing Warhammer, Magic the Gathering. I had done like a session or two of Vampire the Masquerade with
me
friends
too.
back in the day. Yeah. So like I dipped my toes in all of these awesome things, but I never really dove into D&D. And so he was pitching it to me, and then he was like, "Let me tell you about the schools of magic." And I think the next day at lunch, he was like, "Hey, we have lunch at the same time today. We're going to discuss necromancy." And that was my selling point. And then I dove into D&D. I have a background in film studies. I've made short films and music videos and things like that. So when we combined all of these elements after playing for a few years, I kind of took the filmmaker in me and the passion I was having for D&D and pitched the idea to Monty to turn on some cameras and see what we could do. And Monty brought the encyclopedic knowledge of Dungeons and Dragons, and I brought, I don't know, some charm and love and passion and film expertise, and we did what we could, and it's gone pretty well.
Monty's
Yeah,
like,
and
hold on. a minute."
Wonderful.
No,
I
no.
have to give props for the background because my degree's in broadcasting. I actually work nights at a TV station, so yeah.
Yeah, nice.
Monty?
Yeah, so I'm Monty Martin. I am the other half of the Dungeon Dudes. And for myself, as Kelly already said, we met working together at a computer shop where, I was the local Dungeons and Dragons dealer, I guess. so much to say.
Hey,
So-
come here. You want some
we
D&D?
kind of- yeah, we kind of ended up with a game group that was a bunch of really nerdy people. Like, the store was a bunch of nerdy people, and the nerdy people all got together to play some D&D. And so we kind of had this Sunday night thing where people would come after we closed up the shop. People would come over to my place. We'd play some Dungeons and Dragons, and we ran a bunch of camp. Like, we kind of, from that group of people, like, it was one of the first times for me in my life where it was like, wow, this group of people has finished 3 campaigns. And so that was a pretty cool thing that we had going on, and Kelly and I really were enjoying seeing how the group was growing. And so yeah, we started Dungeon Dudes and started posting videos on YouTube, which did nothing for the better part of a year until people started watching our videos, and it just grew and grew. We started live streaming after about a year of doing content on YouTube. We started our live stream on Twitch, which they then also put up on YouTube as well, and that is Dungeons of Drakkenheim. So that was a campaign that I ran as Dungeon Master, and now it has kind of blossomed into this whole other thing where we've been streaming now in the world of Drakenheim as the story has grown beyond the original campaign with more characters and players from that original computer shop group. So shout out to Jill and Joe, who are our other 2 players in the campaign. That all of us, that's how we all met, was at the computer shop. And since then, many of us have now gone our own ways from the store, but that it's still like a place in our hearts.
Yeah, but
Right.
I get that.
And also, you guys been playing D&D and other RPGs for a while, and what would you say your most memorable D&D moments are? Let's go apply to other RPGs as well, of course, but...
Man. All right, I think a moment that always stands out to me was in the first campaign that I was playing with Monty. And for anybody who has watched me in Q&As, you probably know this story, but it's my favorite to tell. Our buddy Josh is the kind of person that will probably always play a barbarian, and you expect him to play a barbarian, and he looks like he should be playing a barbarian. And I was playing a wizard, and the 2 of us were we were like, I don't know, we were 2 sides of a coin, or I don't know, some other expression that is probably better. But we got along really well at the table. It was kind of funny to have the smart wizard and the raging barbarian always side by side. And there was a time where we were going up against our first dragon, and it was the first dragon that we ever fought. And I had just learned the spell polymorph as my wizard, and so I remember that we saw the dragon coming in, and I decided to try out the new spell, and I polymorphed myself into a T-Rex. and Josh's character, so his name's Josh Elderbroom, and his character's name was Elderbroom the Barbarian, because that's all he needs to do. And he climbed up onto the I transformed into a T-Rex. He climbed up onto the T-Rex and rode me into battle against a dragon, and we had this like awesome epic battle. And actually, it's funny that I feel like I didn't do as much as Josh did in that battle, because he ended up jumping onto the dragon, which soared into the air, threw him onto the ground, breathed fire on him and only him, and then tried to hold him underwater to drown him, and he still got up and cut its head off.
That's awesome.
That sounds like a barbarian.
Yeah, the whole battle was so cool, and it was like, I think for me and Josh at least, it was our first time that we had ever felt that level of epicness from a game. And I say this all the time, that there were some minis on a table, but I never remember the minis. I remember a visual in my head that's like an amazing action movie. And the way that it plays out in my head is just so incredible. And that was when I was 100% sold that D&D was the greatest thing in my life. One of the greatest things in my life. I should
Nice
give some
save.
credit to...
You gotta be careful.
Yeah.
Nice save. That is an epic story. What about you,
That is
Monty?
really good, yeah.
So for me, I've mostly run Dungeons and Dragons. I have never been able, I very rarely had the opportunity to play as a player, and in fact, I'm one of those people that I vastly prefer DMing, and so I think that a lot of dungeon masters have that memorable moment where, one of the first times when their players are like, "I had an amazing time last night at the game," but for me, one of the bigger memorable moments was I was running the Red Hand of Doom with Kelly and our group, which is a legendary adventure, and one of my favorites of all time. But what I had done for this campaign specifically, for those that don't know, it involves an army of hobgoblins invading a quaint, rural vale, and the army of hobgoblins over the course of the adventure marches along a road and burns the towns till they get to the capital, and you have a great siege. Well, what I had done earlier in the adventure is we did a level 1 to 5 preamble to that campaign where the players were getting married, where the players were the wedding party of one of the players was getting married, and they had to go and visit all the towns in the Elser Vale and get a wedding present or pick up the prize wedding horse. And so over the course of 3 months, we played this part of the campaign where they got to know everything in this world, and they got to meet the people and the struggles and become local heroes. And then, of course, they then cut to a year later when the players are looking at the map of the Elser Vale and realizing that this town that they love is going to get burned down, and other people that they care about are going to die, and they have to make an awful choice. And they were stressed. And my players came to me after the game and said, "Guys, this was really real. This was really stressful. It wasn't fun. It was palpably real." And for me, that was a memorable moment, because it was this moment of realization where I realized that oftentimes role-playing games are thought of as a fun escape, but they actually have a substantially more power, and they can make us channel other emotions. They can make us feel stress. They can make us feel fear. They can make us and experience those ways when you are playing with a group of people that you love and trust. You can experience things that you couldn't experience in real life. And sometimes it's not always the fun and epic things.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's the hard and difficult things. And so for me, that's always such a powerful memory of realizing that this is a really powerful game. It's not just that it can be fun, which is amazing, but for me, it was this present reminder of wow, we can tell serious stories. We can tell real stories. We can do things, and coming from the world of theater, which is my background, where so many actors and performers and writers and directors, people love making audiences laugh, but making audiences feel something that is more than just a fart joke is pretty hard. Making people think about things is, and so for me, that was the moment where it was, wow, a D&D campaign can be a form of art. It can be something that is far more than just pretending to be an elf. And so that's why it strikes out as such an interesting memory. It doesn't have to be, and if your game is not, if anyone's game is just a relaxing time where you're knocking back a couple cold ones, eating some pretzels, and rolling some dice, and laughing at toilet humor, that's amazing. And I think that's the amazing power of role playing games, is that they can be anything along this massive spectrum from just kicking back with the friends to telling some really amazing stories.
Absolutely. That's awesome.
I just want to say that I forever will be referring to D&D as an art form now, because you just laid it all out of why exactly it is. So I want to thank you for that.
Yeah,
Thanks.
It's
Sure.
That was awesome. Wow. Moving on to something maybe a little less
Serious?
grand.
Yeah.
What is the best piece of gaming advice you've ever received? Whether it's from a book, a person, a video, something.
You know,
'Cause I know there's a lot of inspiration out there. It's kind of tough to nail on one.
oh man, I'm trying to remember where I first heard it. Oh boy. See, a lot of the advice I've gotten came from Monty.
Sounds like a great source of inspiration.
That's fair.
He taught me how to play. But I feel like one of the biggest struggles I had as a DM, and I'm not going to remember exactly where the advice came from, but I also feel like many sources say this, but I want to echo it because it's so important. I was struggling as a first-time DM, and I was constantly disappointed in my DMing because the players kept ruining my plans. And this was the hard lesson that the best piece of advice I ever got was to make scenarios, not stories, as a dungeon master. And I constantly was like trying to orchestrate epic battles. And it was like, the players will walk into this room, there'll be a dialogue between them and the villain, then they'll fight, and then the villain will flee to this other room while they fight. And like, I have it all mapped out. And then of course, it goes nothing like that. And I get frustrated. And so in my first year of being a DM, I was like, what am I doing wrong? Why can't I make this work the way that I'm imagining it to? Like, isn't that my job as a DM? And the answer is it's not.
Right.
Your job as a DM is actually to let go of the reins and understand the scenario that you're putting the players in. And by understanding the scenario, so rather than what room in the dungeon will have what thing happen, it's who's in the dungeon and why. And then once you have that, you just let the players go in and do whatever they're going to do. And it becomes so much more fun when you do that.
Yep.
Because once you let go of the reins, you actually start role-playing with your players. You start improvising with your players. Your players throw wacky ideas out there, and rather than going, oh, that's not at all what I had written down, you go, oh, that sounds great. Let's see what happens. And once I did that, I became so much more confident as a dungeon master. My games were more fun. My players continuously were congratulating me on running an excellent game, and I feel like the problem of most new DMs is trying to do too much planning.
Absolutely. That was a mistake that I made early on myself, where I started in some of the earlier editions, but I really got into it in 4th edition, where that laid a lot of the stuff out very dungeon crawly. So I would always find myself frustrated when somebody wanted to go left to the west when I clearly pointed out the pillar of smoke in the east, and that started to build frustration in me. So I totally understand. And the way you described it as setting scenes is absolutely, in my opinion, one of the best ways to do it, because you're not saying this is going to happen. It's this is kind of what's going on. Let's the players decide what's going to happen. And you said that eloquently, so thank you for that one.
Even in combat, as I mentioned just the other week, I'm running Princess of the Apocalypse. The players encounter a dragon turtle, and after a very strong opening move with his breath weapon, they immediately hit with polymorph, turn it into a regular turtle, and chuck it into a 10-foot wide tunnel and turn the polymorph. And keep in mind, dragon turtles take up a 20-foot by 20-foot area, so
That's awesome.
Yeah.
crunch.
Monty?
A lot of physics happening.
Yeah. You know, I think for me, I've spent so much time like reading, blogs and watching other people's videos and watching other people's advice and watching other people play and listening to talks and all of these sort of things. And I think that like for me, the best sort of the really eloquent place where I think that this advice kind of manifests is in the introduction to Xanathar's Guide to Everything. And it's a really easy thing to miss. But in the intro there, one of the things is that the book kind of says, the dungeon master is the final authority on how the rules work in play. But one of the things that, and everybody knows that, like the DM, you can throw out the rules at any moment. But one of the things that if you read the rest of this that paragraph is the rules are a tool. And so for me that was a revelatory thing of like, if we go on this extension of D&D as an art form, the rules are the medium by which we create and words and language are the medium by which we create that art. So the rules of D&D are the same as your paints and paintbrushes. And so you would never tell a painter, "Oh, just throw your paints out anytime you want." Right?
Yes. Oh my God, yes.
Right? Or just now, the thing is that painters have done amazing things with art. They have done things where, yes, they did throw their brushes out and they just threw the pot of paint at the canvas, and now that's a $20 million piece of art.
I'm in the wrong business.
But not everybody is Jackson Pollock.
Right.
And so you have to remember that, and there's reasons why that is done that way. Not everybody is necessarily Picasso who can break the rules of composition. But Kelly, in fact, actually said this, is that Kelly got this from film school, where one of his film school teachers said, "We teach you the rules so you can learn how to break them properly." Nice. And so if Dungeons and Dragons is a medium, if it's an art form, then an art form has its tools of composition. And so I think that understanding the way the rules work and knowing that the rules aren't there to be a straitjacket for you, they're not there to restrict you. They are there in the same way that a paintbrush or a musical instrument is there. And you can do anything with a paintbrush. But there's certain things there's techniques to using a paintbrush. There are techniques and strategies to do things like dry brushing or layering or watercolor. And actually learning how those things work is empowering for you as the dungeon master, because once you know how they work, as Kelly said, you can break them, and you can break them properly and actually break them in the way that when you break them, you get the outcome from breaking it that you want. Because I think one of the things that we talk, when people say I'm tossing out the rule book, a lot of people forget the story that doesn't get told is the time I tossed the rules out and it blew up in my face.
Right.
Because that does happen, where dungeon masters make bad rulings. Sometimes people ignore the rules, and it actually wasn't a good idea to do it. And so having that little bit of thought about when it is and when it isn't, that to me is that's something that comes from experience, but that is part of the artistry of running a game.
Mm-hmm.
You guys,
I really like the idea that the rules are much like a tool rather than a straitjacket. That's a very good analogy. Is that an analogy?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's a good way to put it. I like that a lot.
Yeah,
that's what I'm gonna take away with
and
that.
it goes hand in hand with talking about it being art and all that stuff. And I think you touch on something that is really important. There is some DMs and people don't talk about their failures, and honestly, I've only improved because I failed so much as a DM. Like every time I make a huge failure, I learn more from that than I ever do just getting a, "Hey, you did a good job." well, no, I want you to tell me what I did wrong now so I can do better next time. And that really, and sometimes it blows up in your face, but sometimes it is magic, kind of what you were saying. And I think all of our, I feel like, and this is just Justin's opinion, and Justin is some no guy with a podcast, but I think that some of the best successes in the world, D&D or not, come from people who have failed a lot. I think the most notable one was Thomas Edison. You know, he was said, "Why do you keep making a light bulb? You've failed 1,000 times." Well, 1,000 times. I learned 1,000 ways not to build a light bulb. I didn't fail. I just learned from each one, and that's kind of how I think DMing is, and even being a player too, because not all players are perfect either, right? And so if you're willing to take your failures and say, okay, this clearly wasn't fun for everybody else. What can I do differently to make it fun for everybody else? How can I have done that differently? So
Yeah. Also, oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, you need to have the experience of what happens when you actually put the deck of many things in your campaign to actually learn why.
Yeah. Yes.
there's a reason why it's a campaign breaker, right? All right. So now I know I always love the interview part because we learn a lot of stories, and we all love D&D. But
Yeah.
I want you to tell us what you can about the world of Drakenheim and your new Kickstarter, Dungeons of Drakkenheim, that launches. Is that tomorrow?
Yeah,
That's tomorrow. June
the
28th.
anxiety is building. Oh man.
Oh, I bet.
It's our first
This is our
one.
first Kickstarter. It's really exciting, and it's kind of like the pregame anxiety is building up now.
Yeah, I saw
Yeah,
your little sign up. It's got the little numbers of people who are following it, and that seems to suggest you guys are off to a pretty damn good start. So
Well, we will see. I hope so. So Drakenheim, Dungeons of Drakkenheim is a complete 5th edition campaign for characters level 1 to 13 that is based on the first season of our live stream campaign that we ran from 2018 to 2019. And Drakenheim is a non-linear adventure where your characters explore the ruins of the city of Drakenheim, which was devastated by falling stars 15 years prior, and is now a contaminated wasteland of wild magic and eldritch contamination, fought over by 5 rival factions, each with their own competing goals of what they want to do with the city and what they want to do with the magical crystals that are now found throughout it.
Monty and I are huge fans of cosmic horror and dark fantasy, so you're going to see a lot of those elements tucked away in here. There's a lot of nods to some of our favorite, like, classic tales of, like, H.P. Lovecraft and things like that, where we just tried to bring that to Dungeons and Dragons in a really impactful way. And along the way, we made some new monsters and some new magic items and new spells that are all kind of feeding into the cosmic horror atmosphere of Drakenheim.
The other secret is that it's the dark fantasy Fallout New Vegas by way of H.P. Lovecraft.
that sounds awesome.
And so we have a lot of inspiration there of like the getting inspired when we were drawing up the campaign of like the exploration of open world games, but the interesting conflicts and outcomes that come in games like the Fallout series that we really love, and wanting to realize that in sort of a role playing game sort of environment. And play around with some of our meta rules and really play with some fun, cool elements of the world itself, but also make it interesting, non-linear exploration-based campaign. One of the most important elements of the ruins of Drakenheim is that the eldritch contamination left in place has caused a mist called the Haze to settle over the entire city, such that characters cannot take long rests in the ruins.
I love you. that is single-handedly one of my favorite things right now, because that ups the challenge difficulty to a new level. I love it. Sorry, that got me really excited.
No, that's something that we were very particular about. Is like Monty's a good enough DM that, in my experience, 5th edition hasn't been easy mode, but I hear online that a lot of people say like it's hard to die in 5th edition, and people will do this thing where they will like do a battle, take a long rest, do a battle, take a long rest. But simply by adding in the haze, what we've done is we've kind of added that sort of barrier that says you need to plan, you need to equip yourself, you need to figure out where you're going and how you're going to get back home. And then each adventure into the city is dangerous and poses a threat. So you have to manage your resources in a way that I think a lot of campaigns don't have you do.
That is that reminds me of in Destiny. There's an area where you die, and that very much reminds me of that, where you almost get nervous going in. And I envision myself going into this situation, but I feel like, does the Warlock get to shine here? Does short rest still apply?
Yep, you can still take short rests.
That's cool.
And we're actually very explicit in saying, we in the rules of like, you can't get around this with a tiny hut. You can't get around this with a rope trick. You know, the way that we've worded our contamination rules is we're very explicitly saying that unless the game mechanic specifically engages with contamination, it doesn't work. So the contamination that happens in the city that can afflict upon your character, you can't cure it with things that remove diseases or curses or dispel magic. It is a new thing that has come from somewhere out there in the void. So the magic that exists in the world doesn't know how yet to fully deal with it. But over the course of the campaign, the characters can invent new spells and invent new magic items to protect them as they delve deeper and deeper into the ruins and get messed up with all the factions that are fighting over things.
I assume. So I assume in your book there's rules that will handle. There'll be rules that handle kind of that crafting aspect.
It's really lightweight. Okay. So we have really lightweight rules that basically say, you know, if you discover this wizard's research and you go to this location, here's the downtime activity for you to brew up these new potions that will protect you. We found, especially like in early drafts of the work and things like that, so we wanted to come up with like really complicated urban exploration rules, and we found that bogs so much down. Like we really like to just have it focus on get you back into the city, get you adventuring, and let the downtime just be downtime. Yep. Maybe that's something we'll explore more in the future, but it ended up that so much of what we've written for the book is the amazing places that you can explore in the city itself. And so this is very much an adventure with cool locations from ruined cathedrals, mage towers, sewers, castles, contaminated gardens, and all that good stuff. So, and what's fun about that is that it's modular too. So even if you're not running the entire campaign, the dungeons are really easy to just rip right out and use somewhere else.
Yeah.
I'm a fan of that.
So we kind of already touched on it a little bit already with like the haze, and I believe you said there was a couple extra classes in there. I don't quite recall. I know you said there was new spells, but do you have any like, I guess, other special homebrew rules, classes, or maybe even races? Because I don't think you guys touched on that, but maybe there are, and we just don't know yet. From Drakenheim that you are willing to share with us.
We aren't doing as many player-focused options in this book. We do have a section for players, but this is a campaign book first. Okay. We might explore player options at a later time in another book if this one does well. But we did include for players. There are a bunch of backgrounds that tie your character into the world of Drakenheim, and we very purposely made the backgrounds have what I'm going to slightly improved features. Because you'll notice, like in backgrounds, a lot of times the feature is like, I'm like the entertainer. It's like you can perform when you go to a town, and like you're like, okay, that doesn't do that much, but it might if the DM wants to play with that. Our
what about
features,
the personal quests, Kelly?
Well, yeah, I'm going to get to that.
Yeah.
I'm going to get to that. But we tried to give the backgrounds some cool features that feel like they actually have some meat and make the backgrounds come alive and make that choice matter. We also introduced 12 personal quests. These kind of are expanded bonds, so you get your personality traits, bonds, flaws, and ideals, but then you get a special personal quest that you choose that is very specific in the idea that now your character is tied to what I'm going to say the meat of the adventure is. So your personal quest might be something simple like you need to find a cure for contamination because a family member has fallen ill and is going to turn into a horrible monster if you don't cure it. So the purpose of your personal quest is now you have a reason to not only go to a horrible place like Drakenheim, but you have a reason to stay there and not leave until you succeed at figuring out what's going to solve your own personal problems. And in doing so, we've made sure that each personal quest is definitely going to get you tangled with the factions. So even by the time you finish your personal quest, you're like, well, now the fate of Drakenheim is in my hands as well, so I guess I got to figure that out. So that's what the personal quests are there for, is to really make your player characters feel like they're part of the adventure and that their choices that they made at character creation are going to be important and the narrative is about them.
And what's more is that when you do finish your personal quest, which unlike we very intentionally design the personal quests that they can be completed before the conclusion of the campaign, because when you finish your personal quest, you can get an extra feat or an extra ability score increase to reflect your character's accomplishment above and beyond just their basic quests. So that is kind of our way of giving the players an individual objective at the outset of the campaign that really ties them. And we also give a framework for the Dungeon Master to build a custom personal quest. So if the players look at the 12 personal quests and like, I don't really like any of these, we've got the guidelines in there for you to work with your DM to homebrew your own.
I really love that because that's something that isn't constantly encouraged for the players to come up with like goals and long-term, goals and short-term goals. And the fact that that's included in there as a reminder and you provide examples and tools that they can do is phenomenal, because that takes that little tip of, hey, when you're building your characters, do this, to here's something functional and I'm giving it to you. So if you weren't planning on doing it, now you are, which is something it's usually left optional. But by imposing it, that you now as a DM have things to pull and the player feels like they have goals to achieve, whether they really intended to or not, which I think is fantastic.
It's also really surprising to me that is somehow not in Dungeons and Dragons.
Right?
In all honesty, like
it's
what?
It's something that we've been doing for years, actually, which is why it made it into the book. Is every time that I sat down to build a character, Monty would be like, all right, let's have a big discussion about how we're going to tie your character into the world. What does your character want? And that was always a very important part of character creation for me. So when we were like, we need to put the way that we create characters as a DM and a player into the book in a mechanical way. And that was actually a lot of fun to figure out what that mechanic was going to look like. Because for Monty and I, it's just a conversation that goes back and forth for like a month. And then when we get to the campaign, it's like I'll present a backstory and Monty will be like, this NPC that you have in your backstory, can we switch it to this? And what he's doing is he's saying, okay, you created an NPC, but if we actually just change it 2%, now it's an NPC that I already have in my campaign, and now you're tied into that. And so by inventing the personal quest, we're basically saying we're doing the work for you. You don't have to have that full... I mean, you should still have a discussion between the players and the DMs, but now there's the tools to just be like, okay, you're tied to an NPC, you're tied to a faction, you're planning to kill one of the factions, or you're trying to find one of the great treasures of Drakenheim. And yeah, you're going to get into it, and you're going to end up in the thick of things, whether you like it or not.
Yeah,
Love it.
Yeah,
That should just be a DM tip. Like, actually.
Why did you say that?
Really good.
It's fun because it's connected to the map as well. So like many of the personal quests reference, when you put down the map of the city, players can see, oh, these are the landmarks that are there, and they'll see their personal quest be like, if your personal quest is to get to the Kleinberg estate and raid the vault there, well, you're going to look at the map and be like, oh, that's where it is in the city? Well, how do we get there? And already you realize that there's more challenges along the way. Right. So it really helps the Dungeon Master as well give the players motivations and plot hooks. Because one of the things that we realized with Drakenheim in many ways is that you really do have to answer the question, why is your character going here? Because we kind of went with this mantra of a person who's not willing to risk their life for something does not come here.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So that means you got to have a strong motive, and I like that. That's something that there's constantly on their mind. So, we're running over on time. So first of all,
A little bit.
I'm honestly you've got a backer in me now. I'm sold. And at
Awesome.
least one of our followers is
awesome.
sold because he's just saying, well, now I got 2 things I got to back this week. So, first of all, I am super excited for this. I can't wait to see everything that you guys got going on. This clearly is has a heart and soul attached to it, and I'm super
Absolutely.
excited to see how it goes. Honestly, I expect it to go pretty good for you guys. I mean, you got a pretty
Thank
decent
you.
following, and the content just sounds amazing. Watching
Yeah,
through
it
your
really does.
watching through your actual play show, I can tell that it's very well fleshed out, and there's a lot going on, and I'm really, really excited for it. Do you guys have any last comments on that before we move on to the next segment?
Well, thank you for for bringing us on, and we're so glad that we've made the sale.
Yeah, and it's live tomorrow. So
Yep.
for everybody who's watching this, check it out tomorrow on Kickstarter. And if you back it in the first 48 hours and get a physical copy, you get a special Drakenheim coin, the Golden Gilder, which is for backers who back in the first 48 hours. So you can get a collectible coin if you back.
I like
It's
collectibles.
awesome. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
down.
Wait.
All right, so if you're following along, we'll drop the link in the comments again, or you can find a link in our blog at greatgaming.com. With that,
And now, what you've all been waiting for. Our Unearthed Tips and Tricks segment, where we bring you new and reusable material for both players and DMs.
alrighty, we are back. For our Unearthed Tips and Tricks, our wonderful guests here have brought us a character for our character concept of the podcast.
Ooh, yeah. So I put together a character concept that you could actually play in Drakenheim if you wanted to. This character is named Skunderbrand, and I've kind of made it that you could play. Most people, adventurers in Drakenheim, are human, but you can go anywhere you want with it. When the meteor first struck Drakenheim, as Drakenheim was the capital city of the kingdom, several military expeditions were put together to try to invade the ruins and take it back, all of which failed. Skunderbrand is a survivor of one of these failed expeditions and had to watch his close comrades in arms transform into hideous monsters in these failed attacks. And so in the years since, he sought the means to restore the form of his former compatriots, and was duped into becoming a warlock of a fiendish entity who lied to him, saying that this entity would have the means to reverse it, but did not. And so now Skunderbrand's personality is that he is a bargainer who will always mortgage the future to survive one more day. They make promises that they have difficulty keeping, which is a very big challenge as having a warlock patron, and they are chasing their past and stumbling onto their future, and they are obsessed with their old mistakes, but they keep making new ones. They are a gaunt person. They might have once been an athletic soldier in their youth, but now they're in their early 40s, and time has not been kind to them. They wear a dark shawl with traveling gear, a heavy coat, and a broad hat, and they wear these to conceal the scars of the eldritch mutations that they once developed during the failed attack. And their patron cured these mutations, but when they incur the wrath of their patron, the patron undoes the magic that holds back the mutations and threatens them with being further cursed. And so that is their motivation now, is to hopefully wriggle out of their pact, but also still to resolve the mistakes that they've made along the way.
Dude, I totally want to use this guy as a quest giver. Hey, I need you to go get this thing so I can undo this pact. Go, go, go.
I'm actually
But-
madly curious what he made a pact with.
Yeah, I was gonna say, did you have an idea of what creature he made a pact with?
The world of Drakenheim is inhabited by many fiendish entities, some of which who claim to be gods in their own right. And this entity is one known as He Who Laughs Last.
Oh, I love it. So
It's
is
always a good thing to have a pact with, I must say.
so does this character's moral alignment, where does that fall? Would you say?
I think that this is one of those people who struggles because they often believe they're doing the right thing, but are always making mistakes. So their heart might be in the right place, but this is someone that probably doesn't have a very high wisdom score. They don't have the right sense of judgment to really understand that to like see, oh, if I do this, it's going to come back to bite me.
I love
Fair.
it. That, once again, I see this as a quest giver hiring the players to find an item, and then not revealing to them that that item causes some sort of damage to somebody else or the area around, because he wants to break this curse so badly. While he might feel bad about doing this thing that might hurt other people, he's suffering so bad he just wants to, he'll do whatever to get away from it. At least that's kind of what I'm envisioning. And I think that'll make for, I love moral ambiguity. You talked about art and that sort of stuff, and moral ambiguity is one of the things that I absolutely love. And I can see this being a good-hearted person willing to go beyond what they would normally do to end their suffering. So I think this is a fantastic character concept. Did you want to say something, Kelly?
Oh no, I just, I mean, Monty nailed it there.
Yeah.
I think Warlocks in Drakenheim are a really fun concept. I mean, like, there's room for every class, but I think you really get to play with your pact, and I don't know, it's pretty messy in the world of Drakenheim. It's a dark and scary place, and the things you might do for your patron. I mean, we have Joe playing a Warlock in our campaign right now, and him and his patron is a fan favorite. So
That's awesome. All
I
right.
think one of the best patrons I ever homebrewed was when I based off the Great Old One. I basically made the patron a very evil eldritch version of Barney the Dinosaur.
nice.
Jeez.
And it basically flavored Tasha's hideous laughter as singing the song that they always do at the end of the show.
All right. That'll do it for our character concept, the
Pretty good.
Skunderbrand. Thank you for that there, Monty. Today's monster variant is the Kasmakula. I forgot what that means. I put a word in a Sanskrit, and that's what came out, and I forgot what it was. But I'm super excited for this monster. In order to build this monster, you're going to start with something simple. You're going to start with the Winter Wolf. This little armor, almost like a giant armadillo kind of thing. Very, very nasty looking. But you're going to have to get rid of some features. We're going to give something new in its place to make it a little more different. So it's going to lose its immunity to cold. Instead, it's going to have immunity to psychic damage. You're going to get rid of its cold breath, and it can no longer speak languages or understand languages specifically. I think it doesn't speak. And you're going to lower its intelligence to make it more of a dumb creature, something like a 6 or something. Now, where it gets interesting is we're changing the cold breath to a confusion breath. It's going to exhale a discombobulating gas in a 15-foot cone, and each creature in that area must succeed a DC 13 Wisdom saving throw. On a failed save, the target can't take reactions and must roll a d4 at the start of each of its turns, determine its behavior on that turn. This goes from 1 to 4, so you're going to roll a 1, it's random movement in a random direction, roll a d8, and they just run around aimlessly. On a 2, the creature doesn't move or act or take any actions, completely shuts down. Or a 3, the creature uses its action to make a melee attack against a randomly determined creature within reach. If there are no creatures within, it does nothing, another potential loss of action. Or number 4, it acts randomly. I love this little armadillo looking bastard. I think it's a lot of fun, and Confusion Breath recharges on a 6, so they can't use it all the time, but this will catch your players by surprise and leave them surely confused, I promise. What do you guys think about this?
I like it.
I love it. I'm a big fan of abilities like this too. I love when you have a rider where the save is failed by 5 or more.
Yes.
And I could see making either a bigger or more advanced version of this one that even maybe has the breath do a little bit of psychic damage. If the saving throw is failed by 5 or more, to really hammer home that this is like frying your mind, right?
Roll on the madness table.
Yeah. Yes, if you fail by 5 or more,
yes.
madness table.
Madness table. You described it as an armadillo, right? Like a big armadillo.
Yeah.
I like the idea of this psychic armadillo that's just like belching psychic energy into your face, and you're like, I don't know what's going on anymore. This thing breathed on me, and I messed up. It's a really fun concept. Armadillos are. I think armadillos are such a fun creature, and we don't see enough of them. So I like this concept. I think it's cool.
Yeah, I can't wait to release it to my patrons. You guys are gonna love the artwork and the story and everything that goes with it. And I'm totally adding exactly what Monty just suggested. So you're welcome.
I got you.
Thank you.
Nice.
More lethal.
Because that's a really good idea. I like that a lot.
And I feel bad because I just realized that was Blue and Ian was gonna take that one. My bad, bro.
It happens. You got excited.
That'll do it for our. Do you want to take the counter? You can just read the first part and summarize it. That'll do it for our monster variant, the Kasamakula. That might be. I think that's like psionic or something, or something mental in Sanskrit. Anyway, would you like to take the encounter there, Ian? I think you
got it. Our encounter is the Vault of Souls, and it's a skill challenge for all you 4th edition fans out there.
What?
I lost you, but you came back.
Yay!
Vault of Souls, a massive
challenges.
ancient city filled with a variety of spirits and undead creatures. The city was besieged by a necromancer named Dazad the Defiler and his undead army. An adventurer by the name of Islar the Wise, an archmage, had no choice but to banish the entire city into a demi-plane to rid the area of the undead plague. The city is
One way to
slowly
go about
beginning to... The city is slowly beginning to phase back into the world. Well, the undead plague that comes along with it. Characters gotta dig through some ruins to discover the entrance to Islar's Lost Tower.
Still bad?
And once inside, they must recover the keys to the ritual spell materials needed to push it back into its demi-plane where it belongs. As in, not here. If they don't, the undead scourge will fully return to the realm. After they locate the tower's location, they must find a way to get inside and convince the guardian to let them search its lure.
Ooh, what do you guys think about this?
I really like the idea. It's such a cool concept to have this this place that's like drifted into a demi-plane, and it's like leaking back and bringing all sorts of bad stuff with it. It really is like that. Even if you don't have a doom clock mechanic, it feels like there's a clock ticking. Like this is going to destroy everything if it comes back in here. We need to push it back. And I always love that, the intensity of feeling like there's a time limit, even if you don't have one. I don't know if you guys are ever playing a video game and like, they're like, you have to get out of here quickly. And you realize after you're like sweating and rushing that you're like, there's no clock counting down anywhere. I'm just playing a story, but I still feel intense because I know that something's horrible could happen if I waste my time. And I think that this advertises that really well. It really is like, oh, it's coming back. We need to get in there and push it back into its demi-plane, which makes there be an agency to it. So I like that.
Absolutely.
I think one of the best examples I've seen of them like making it look like it's a doom clock but isn't was in the Persia game that came out from the PS2. Like jumping from stalactite to stalactite. When you jump on them, they start shaking. So you're like, oh crap, they got to the next one. Then I looked away for a moment when somebody asked me a question. I was hopping, but I looked back like, wait, still shaking. I just stood there for about 30 seconds. it's not falling. You just mixed it and then it fell. It's like, you jerks.
Yeah, it's always that intensity, but sometimes they'll just kind of throw that in to make you feel like you need to hurry. But I like the need to hurry. I feel like that's a good mechanic.
Yep.
It's like giving you a timer without actually seeing the timer.
Yeah.
Because you know that you're going to, well, you will likely die. I wouldn't say you will die, but likely. In this case, you will. But
or the city will, or anybody around, I guess.
It gives like a large sense of importance while you're doing this, I guess, is the best way to put it.
The fact that this is a series of skill challenges kind of builds in a timer, whether you actually have one in front of you or not.
Yep. If you guys don't know, skill challenges are one of my favorite things. I love them. They're a great way to narrate powers and features and things that happen over long periods of time. There's rules for that in the show notes on the website if you want to get all the details for that. Monty, did you have anything you wanted to add? Or
Long.
I think the biggest thing that I like to do when adapting skill challenges to 5th edition is I like to allow characters to cast spells to get automatic successes.
Yes. Absolutely.
And so this seems like a really good one where you could use spells like Magic Circle, Dispel Magic, Banishment, or other abjuration spells to grant you automatic successes. And then if you paired this one with a combat encounter, so your choice of using spell slots would really matter.
Oh, I love it. That's one thing we talk about a lot, because we wrote one of our projects was 2 of them was Challenge Accepted, which is all about skill challenges. And one thing that we always tried to reinforce is skill challenges are malleable. If your player comes up with a power or a feature or something that will let them just succeed, let them use it. They're consuming a resource for that success. And that you want them to succeed, you want them to think of ways to overcome these challenges. So I love the way you think, Monty. I think that'll do it for our encounter of the podcast. Before we move on to our magic item, let's take a moment to give a word from our sponsors. Me! So, we have recently released our Memorable Monsters. If you do not know what Memorable Monsters, this was our first Kickstarter. It is 50 fully fleshed out monsters with bonds, flaws, personalities, ways you can use them, from villain, merchant, ally, quest giver, whatever. They have current and long-term motives. And this is just a absolutely powerful guide. They can be villains, they can be heroes, they can, they can just be the random NPC if you want somebody that's interesting. They got fully fleshed background stories and everything. And we absolutely love it. Oh, look, he's showing us too. Yeah. So definitely consider checking it out at critacademy.com. We're super excited because it's our first hardcover. That's why we're doing a new project. Anyway,
awesome.
So I forgot. Apparently, I forgot to do that. That just showed up in the middle because I forgot to do it earlier. So, would you like to tell us about our magic item today, Austin?
Yes. So our magic item today is, I love magic items, the Mecha Armor from Calder's Gazetteer. Now, it's armor, it's plate armor, because, of course, it's legendary and requires attunement. So, this massive suit of heavy armor features thick steel plating covering complex arcane mechanisms that aid the wearer's power and mobility. The armor fully encases the wearer, giving them the appearance of a construct. While wearing the armor, you gain the following benefits, which, by the way, there is a list. Resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage from non-magical weapons that are not adamantine, because you're wearing a giant mech suit. You have advantage on strength and constitution saving throws. Your movement speed increases by 10. Your melee attacks deal 1 additional damage die. Your standing, jump, and long jump distances double. You count as 1 size larger when determining your carrying capacity and the weights you can push, drag, or lift. You can wield 2-handed weapons using 1 hand. Very fun. And you can take no damage from falling fewer than 60 feet. However, this is not without detriment. You are cursed. When you roll a 1 on an ability check, attack roll, or saving throw, the armor's arcane energy diminishes. You lose the above benefits, and instead become restrained until they doff the armor, requiring 10 minutes, by the way. And then the armor regains its benefits after 8 hours of not being worn. So hopefully it doesn't get stolen by the local rogue. Great.
You?
Wow. It's a risk reward there.
Right.
Intense. Something funny that I think Monty and I mentioned that we're big fans of Fallout, and I think that we've played around so many times with the idea of making magic items that are basically power armor. And I feel like this pulls on that same thread. It's like that love of just like D&D could use a suit of power armor where you just get inside and like, you know, power armor also has that thing. Doesn't it blow up if like, I don't know.
I believe it does, yeah.
Where you could blow up the fusion cores and seal them. And yeah, because I think we have one of the magic items for Drakenheim is this, that it might end up being a stretch goal if it makes it in, which is a suit of plate armor that is powered by the crystals from the crater, and its energy is directly tied to, like, it doesn't regenerate its energy on its own. You actually have to continuously power it.
That's
which,
cool.
I don't think it's quite as powerful as this. This is super powerful.
That's why it has the curse, I think.
Yeah.
And that
5% chance.
It's a huge chance of failure.
Yeah.
Like, you wear this thing, you better be ready to die.
Yeah, take the lucky feat if you have this armor.
I'm rolling a halfling.
Yeah, does it come in halfling size?
It does
It's a
now.
suit of armor, technically, yeah. I mean,
Oh my god.
yeah, the fact that it can happen on virtually anything, attack roll, ability check, or saving throw, it's like, oh, you rolled a 1? Man, that's rough if you're in the air.
Yeah.
Luckily, you don't take damage from 60 feet or... No, if you roll a 1,
No,
it stops and
if it's a
fails. Oh,
Yeah.
no! You're
You're
like
just
Iron Man
falling
when he
down.
first escapes that cave, just falling out of the sky. Oh my gosh. I would totally love the flavor of having to pick up all the pieces. Downtime, 2 days to find all the components.
I gotta say this though, I mean, I love mechs in general and mech suits, definitely a win. I think the only item I can think of, well, aside from the Artificer archetype, that has a mech suit is in Tasha's, the Mighty Servant of Liko,
Nice.
or how the heck you pronounce it. And that thing is absurd.
Yeah, that thing was a literal army tank, but in D&D.
Not to be confused with the Element monster variant we covered, that was a literal tank.
It wasn't actual.
The Iron Elephant.
elephant.
Yeah. All right, so that'll do it for our magic item, the Mecha Armor from Galder's Gazetteer. Kelly, would you like to tell us about our Dungeon Master tip today?
Yeah, so the Dungeon Master tip is from the Kobold Guide to Game Mastering, and we're talking about integrating the characters. Now, interestingly enough, this is something that's very important to Monty and I, which is why we created personal quests for our book. But integrating the characters into your campaign is something that I don't think is advertised enough in D&D, and that is super important. When you're setting up a game story, no matter the system or genre, you want your players to engage with the story. You want them to care. You need to integrate their characters into the narrative. Remember all that communication that we were talking about. I guess I'm reading the quote here. This is the first place where it pays off. Once you have a good idea of who the player characters are, think about what motivates them. What do they want? Who do they love or hate? What places or things are important to them? The best stories aren't you telling the players what happens, nor are they reacting to whatever whims strike the players. The best stories come about from interplay, and that starts on your end. It doesn't matter if you're using a published adventure or presenting something you created yourself. Look at the overall story that you're going to present and identify the characters, places, events, and things that are important to that story. Once you have those key points in mind, start looking for ways to tie the player characters to them. Monty and I, specifically, we actually talk about this, I think, in our How to Run a Session 0, how to do better character creation. We have several videos where we preach this idea that you should always have a conversation with your DM and negotiate the backstory so that you can both come to terms. Don't be stuck on the elements you think you want in your backstory if the DM has some ideas to help bring them to life in the context of the campaign. And I also think that, if you go in and you're like, I built this character and they, if you come up with some crazy idea that makes it sound like they have no reason to go on the adventure, then you're not really doing the part of building a proper player character. And the Dungeon Master should take the time to talk to their players, each one individually, and say, who's your character? What does your character want? And then have some ideas ready to offer as advice to help bring that character into the game world, have them be important in the narrative of the campaign you're about to set out on. Even when I ran something like I ran Out of the Abyss a few years ago, and I read through the entire campaign and looked at the back, there were these options there, but I actually wrote out bigger options and integrated them more and had each player figure out something that they were attached to, a reason why they had even looked at the Underdark in the first place, and then ended up captured. But what was the reason for going there in the first place, and what was it they hoped to accomplish? And I seeded them throughout the campaign, and this helped the narrative build and made it more important that they were there.
I love it.
Right.
Some good stuff.
I really do think it's a good tip, because I feel like every time I actually built a in-depth character story and turned it over to the DM, then introduced her, I'm like, whoa. You do realize how my character will interact with this, right?
Yeah. Monty, I got to give Monty a lot of credit for doing a phenomenal job since I started Dungeons and Dragons. That every time I've handed him a character, he'll say a few things, but he won't give anything away. And then halfway through the campaign, he'll just start dropping bombs on my character, and I'm just like, I was not ready. Like in the Red Hand of Doom campaign, my family lived in one of those towns, and we let it burn, and then I found my father on a raft with a bag over his head, and I freed him, and when I pulled the bag off, he was already a zombie. And it was just like, I just remember that moment, but it was like fulfilling, like, I had this like thing going with my character and my character's dad, and it was devastating. We like left on bad terms, and then Monty killed him, and it was definitely like it pulled at the heartstrings, and I was like, oh my god. And it was those little moments that Monty knew what to pull on because we had those conversations.
That's awesome. Monty, do you have anything to add to that?
Just to say that, like, pulling it off takes work, and you have to have conversations with your players constantly, and there has to be trust between DMs and players.
Yeah.
You have to know what is going to work for them. Like, killing a character's father and having them animated as a zombie, I did that, and I pulled that narrative with Kelly because I knew that Kelly liked, like, as a person, I know that Kelly likes that kind of drama and is interested in those kind of twists and turns for his character. So you can't, you still have to exercise care when you're doing these things and make sure that you are not crossing lines, because it comes into like, what is the fantasy that player is interested in exploring with their character. And as long as you're true, like, because everyone, when you make a character, I guarantee you have the awesome image in your mind of what that character's essence is, like their movie trailer moment. And that is the thing that as a dungeon master you have to make sure that you keep in mind and that you don't betray for a player, because the fantasy that player has of the character is something that they hold in their hearts.
Absolutely. And that's something that if I don't want to sound like an asshole, some DMs just don't do right, and they end up pushing a player away instead of bringing them more into the story. And I think that's important that you talk about, have those conversations. I mean, a lot can go on in like session 0, but there should be continuous conversations throughout a big campaign as well. So
yeah, in a current campaign, one of our players is playing a grandmother who has 10 children and several grandchildren, and I had a conversation with her and said, like, if I were to do something involving your family, would you be okay with that in terms of character? She's like, yes, but please don't kill anybody. And I'm gonna respect that. I wanted to create an interesting scenario, but she said, I don't know if that's where I want to take this character at this stage, so let's not have any of them die.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of other things you can do to pull that character in without death. I ran a campaign once where a player had something similar. I don't want my family to die. And so the different approach was there was like a rift that was created in the area, and it slowly expanded till it swallowed the town. Well, what it did is it pulled everything into the Shadowfell. And so they
Yeah.
had to venture into the Shadowfell to rescue their family. It wasn't that their family was just dead, but they were running, hiding from all the shit that's in the Shadowfell.
If you-
And so,
Yeah, if you want
I-
a super real political conflict that involves the character's family, have two characters' family members have wildly different political opinions
Oh, yeah.
that feed into the conflict of your story.
Great way to put it.
for sure.
Also, while this is a DM tip, it is also extremely important that the players must be willing to make these backgrounds and willing to be malleable for the DMs to create these moments. Because if you are the type of player who is so rigid to sit there and be like, nah, it has to happen this way, I won't accept anything else, well then I'm sorry, dude, but like,
I'm going to go focus on somebody else that's more fun.
yeah, like it's like you still have responsibilities as a player. There is some form of commitment that is
Yeah.
that needs to be made as a player. This is a group effort at the end of the day.
For sure.
And a lot of not all the responsibility can be put onto the DM. It also relies on the player as well to kind of feed into the story, to present agency, and to actively just be engaged with the story and trying to create these connections that the DM can then reach out to and actively do something with.
Right.
So,
All right.
I do agree with the fact, though, that the players do play a role with that. Because, like, the very first thing I thought about, though, was, like, I was playing Mutants and Masterminds, which is a superhero RPG. And my character came from a multiverse where, due to the actions that happened there, he was very biased against people with superpowers. And needless to say, everybody else in the group had superpowers, so that was an interesting character to work with.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, that'll do it for our Dungeon Master tip of the podcast, Integrate the Characters. I'm going to make this one pretty short and sweet. Our player tip of the podcast is, Don't be a dick. And you can avoid dickitude by experimenting with a shifty sale. I'm sorry, I forgot to tell you guys about that.
yeah, I was gonna say.
Not written in there.
Tell them that.
At higher levels in Dungeons & Dragons, let's be honest, money isn't usually an issue. As characters begin to raid lost tombs and take dangerous quests and even loot corpses from their victims or their allies, bastards.
That's me.
But in the early life of being an adventure can be tough, especially on the coin pouch. So while there are near limitless ways to make money, some require a little extra work. Well, with this strategy, you can earn money indefinitely, so long as you travel regularly. So, in this example,
Indeed.
one of the most valuable resources in fantasy is cattle and other beasts of burden, such as horses and oxen. Well, when the rogue gets together with the druid and decides to pull off a quick scam, they walk into a small village town. He's carrying old Bessie here. Hey, excuse me, sir. I'm looking to sell old Bessie here. She's got a lot of life left still in her, and I was wondering if you'd be willing to take her off my hands. I hear the going rate is 50 gold apiece, but I'm willing to let you out for about 35, mostly because my dog won't stop barking. Mostly because, honestly, I got somewhere else to be, and she's just slower than I need. You think you can help me out? Of course you can. Because let's be honest, how is a farmer gonna know that it's a druid shapeshift? So instead, the druid gets sold off, especially with a little bit of deception or persuasion. Boom, they're out the day. The following night, poof, Bessie disappears. On to the next town. Rinse and repeat. What do you guys think?
Honest as a used horse salesman.
This is a great little scheme. I love that you just travel from town to town doing, like, it gives me for, like, I think of the Brothers Grimm movie where they travel from town to town faking ghost stories. And, like, I don't know, I think I as a DM would have if I was a DM and my players were doing this over and over again, I would then orchestrate a situation eventually where they sell the cow off and then they bring the cow in to be slaughtered. And now the players need to deal with that. But that would happen after like 5 or 6 of these. It's like, now that you think you have the lay of the land and you know how to run the scheme perfectly, then you throw a wrench in the gear and mess with them. And it's like, all right, thanks for the cow, and then they bring it right in. They start picking up their big butcher knives and stuff, and it can go all sorts of fun places. Now you have a rescue mission for the druid.
Well, and what's cool is now that if they change back the druid to get away, that becomes obvious what they did. So now you end up walking into every little village and there's posters. Don't trust these bastards. They're gonna try to scam you. You know?
Yeah, yeah.
Or like maybe they'll hire some people who have like true sight somehow or something. Like, hey,
Farmer ain't got
something
money for
strange
that.
about that cow.
What do you think, Monty?
I think that you could also pull this off with polymorph.
Yep,
Oh yeah.
Of course.
I could totally see that. I feel if you get to those higher levels, that's definitely because that's a 4th level spell, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I think so.
okay.
Yeah.
I'll just
But
like
I-
capture all of the goblins and then just turn them into cows at each town.
Yeah, you could capture a goblin, polymorph them into because a goblin's challenge rating 1/4 and a cow is challenge rating 1/4. So you could
That is
capture a
so
goblin,
funny.
polymorph it into a cow, sell the goblin cow. It turns back into a goblin. Then the farmer thinks the goblin ate the cow.
Nice. Oh my
Or,
god! And
spring
then you
bring up-
go ahead.
Or Spring brought up of a post earlier when you use like summon on animals and you summon cows, which are technically fake creatures, also only for an hour.
I'd like to sell my
And
herd.
these poor farmers.
Right? No wonder they're poor. Nothing they got is
Adventurers
real.
are jerks.
Right? Real a-holes. All right. I think that'll do it for our player tip of the podcast. Don't be a dick. And you can avoid dickitude by practicing a shifty sale. Now,
Well, you
before...
can say that's the exact opposite of not being a dick.
It's totally a dick. Before we close out today, we have one more gift to give away. Compliments of our generous sponsors.
And today we are giving away Dunwood, Demons, Druids in Danger by Joe Resso. This Forgotten Realms sourcebook provides 9 new adventures and plenty of background lore to start adventuring. And around the forest once known as Roland's Wood. Even if you're not interested in the Forgotten Realms, the adventure contained within it can be easily adapted to other campaign settings. I call it a win.
Yep.
And today's winner is Emo Monkey 09. Win? Yeah. Did that win? Not a problem. Over to craighenry.com, and not only can you subscribe for your chance to win, but you can check out our free goodies that we give away every week.
Wonderful. Yes.
Emo monkey.
Before we close out, Monty, Kelly, thank you guys so much for joining us. Do you guys want to give yourselves one more plug before we close out here?
Yeah, thank you so much. We are the Dungeon Dudes on YouTube. You can hit us up at youtube.com/dungeondudes. And you can also find our Dungeons of Drakkenheim Kickstarter by checking us out on Kickstarter or at drakenheim.com.
And the Kickstarter goes live tomorrow, so be sure to check in and get your copy. And also make sure if you are interested in the book, you can check out our live stream, which airs live on Tuesday nights, where we play through our campaign world that we have created, which you'll see in the book. And the videos also go up on YouTube on Friday as well. And you can catch up with all of the Dungeons of Drakkenheim, Shadows of Drakenheim, and our regular YouTube content as well. It's also available on podcasts. The 2 campaigns are available on Google Play, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify.
Can't recommend these guys enough.
Thank you for the glowing
Thank you.
recommendation.
Yes, my voice has so much weight behind it. Some random guy on the internet with a camera and a mic.
Isn't that all of us?
I was gonna say, isn't that all of us? Like,
Yeah, pretty much.
It does look like you might have some extra backers in chat, so I'm super excited for that.
Amazing. Thank you.
If you enjoyed the show, please join us on our next episode. We'll be discussing Galder's Gazetteer with the popular YouTuber Zipper on Disney. What? In 2 weeks, because we're taking the 4th of July Independence Day off.
oh yeah.
Boom!
Yep.
So we're
sorry,
super
we're-
excited for that.
Not gonna be there next week.
If you enjoyed the show and you want to support us, please visit us at critacademy.com. Follow us on social media and leave us a review on iTunes. If you don't know, leaving a review for any content creator is single-handedly one of the best things you can do, because no matter how awesome I think I am or I tell you, it means so much more coming from somebody else. Because I'm a little biased. That'll do it for the show today. I am your host, Justin.
And I was Monty Martin.
And I'm Kelly McLaughlin.
We were the Dungeon Dudes. We are the Dungeon Dudes as your guests this week. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I'm your co-host, Austin.
I'm your co-host, Dan. Thanks for listening.
Keep your blades sharp and spells prepared, heroes. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.